Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Inside Out podcast.
Okay, today is going to be an interesting, I guess, a little different
A
than
little
before
different.
instead of interesting. Well, hopefully it's interesting. Okay. Today we're going to showcase what some of the things that we've done besides architecture and interior design, but specifically about our publishing company, which we created in 2019, which is called Andelani Press. Andelani Press basically came out of I would say about an experience we had.
hmm
We were, I guess, approached by a company to publish a book about our work.
Yeah.
And then in the process, we realized that uh, in order for us to get that published, we were asked to basically
Give up,
sign away
sign away our rights.
uh,
Our our rights as
rights as human beings.
no, our rights as
Uh,
authors. Yes.
yeah, and also the intellectual property for at least 5 years. And the challenge with that is that we were not we felt that we were not in control of our own work. um so we decided to say,
Mhm.
okay, let's just create a publishing company
Let's self-publish
that
and
that allows us to not only publish our own work but also use it as a platform to publish other people, artists, architects, interior designers, and so forth, uh, um, and
co-
not have them go through what we went through.
we don't want them to have to give up their intellectual property
Correct. We don't
rights.
want them to give up their intellectual property and allow them to control their own work. So now we've published 4 books. Two of them were written by us. The last two, one was written by Jaime
Jordan
Jordan
Frau.
Frau, and then the latest one has been written by Julio César Pérez, which we'll have an interview with him right after
Right after
this.
this.
Right. But we wanted to actually talk to you guys about, for us, how important it is that we are using this platform to showcase work that we feel is important, that needs to be put out there.
hmm
So,
And just interesting fact, we named the press company, Andelani Press, is named after our 3 daughters, Andrea, Ella, and Nicole. Andelani.
right. So we're not very creative. Um, but because it's such a personal thing, because it's the name of our daughters, and because we want to be able to uh, choose and curate what we feel people might want to see, or better, what we love. And like I said, and give them the control of their work. That's the genesis of why we created Andelani Press.
And I think it's also great because we are well, we're interior designers and we also have a sensibility for design and graphic design as well. So this has given us an opportunity to design these beautiful books that we get into every single detail of the book. So
Well,
that's fun
and
too.
the opportunity to work closely with writer and creative people in an environment that could actually, like I said already, showcase people's work with the intent to also educate. And in the case of Cuba, it's very specific because we are. I mentioned that my father. I think I've mentioned before that my father is Cuban. Her father is Cuban, and there's that emotional connection not only with Cuba but also both of us were born and raised in Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rico is part of the Great Antilles, which Cuba is part of. As a matter of fact, the Puerto Rican flag and the Cuban flag were designed by the same person, and there's just a change of the
The
actual
colors are inverted.
colors inverted. So there's a lot of connection specifically between Puerto Rico and and
Cuba.
Cuba. So for us, this was, like I said, an opportunity to actually bring to everyone something that's dear to our heart.
I'm actually really, really excited about this publication in particular because it's really a journey into the history of Cuba through its architecture, particularly courtyard design, which is my personal favorite.
Right.
I love courtyards. and the pictures are just incredible. I mean, the author, Julio César Pérez, who's an architect, he took most of these pictures himself, and so you really get a glimpse of, honestly, just how amazing Cuban architecture
You-
and the urban fabric was
uh,
really ahead of its time.
and the connectivity,
Mhm.
and cultural connectivity. So we are like I think you said it. We're very proud of it, and we're very proud that we created Andelani. And if you're interested, you can actually buy it at andelanipress.com. You could also buy it through Amazon, and if you're in Miami, you can go to Books and Books, and hopefully there'll be more places for you to actually be able to buy this wonderful journey through a Cuban history and architecture, via the eyes of the courtyard typology. With that, like I said before, I'm gonna now have an opportunity to interview Julio Cesar, our good friend. And sadly for everyone, Cristina is not gonna be here for us for that interview. So,
Checking out.
well, so how do we end normally?
Well, remember, everyone, that transformation begins from the inside out. So,
See you soon.
see you soon.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Inside Out. Today, I'm sure you're all disappointed because I am not with. I'm without Cristina Villalón. And I think that she would do a much better job than me. But I'm very happy because it's the first time that we have an invited guest.
What an honor.
Right?
Yeah, it's a great honor
Well,
to be the first.
I want to very quickly introduce you, and then I want to get into some of the topics. We Today we have Julio César Pérez Hernandez. He's an architect. He's urbanist. He's educator. He's a leader within the industry. He's a Cuban-born architect. He was born in Cuba. He lived in Cuba. He was educated in Cuba. He had the great opportunity, I believe it was in 2000, to actually go to Harvard. He was invited for a fellowship. Later, he was invited to teach at Harvard for a semester. And then in 2012, he became a permanent resident of the United States. And then he became a professor at the University of Notre Dame. This is a university where we both actually teach. I'm very proud of that. Um, and Julio Cesar actually was the first and only Cuban invited to the program at Harvard. Is that correct?
Today, yes.
Until today. Until
Until
at
today.
least
I hope we
August.
get another one soon.
It will be great to get another one. But the reason we have Julio Cesar here, besides the fact that we've known each other for over a decade now, and then we've become quite close friends, is the fact that actually he just authored a book called Courtyards of Cuba, which is a work that we're going to talk a little bit about today. It's a work that has been brewing for over 35 years. And it's published by Andelani Press, which I'll get to talk to you guys a little bit about the history of Andelani Press. But before that, again, thank you, Julio Cesar, for
Thank you for
being here.
having me, Ricardo.
Well, Julio Cesar is also in Puerto Rico because we're in Puerto Rico right now, and he has a formal presentation of his book tonight. We also had an excellent presentation in Miami a couple days ago at Books and Books, which we'll show you some pictures, but it was crazy the amount of people that were there. I'm glad they didn't call the fire department because it would have been problematic. But that must have made you proud, don't you think?
I'm very happy with that, and I'm very grateful to Andelani Press, and especially to you and Cristina and the whole team led by Carla Joan.
Well, listen. The reason I think that um, the Cuban story still resonates, and it's been almost 70 years since the change of regime in 1959. What do you think that is, by the way?
Some people call it regime, some people call it government.
Right.
I call it a mess.
Oh, I do too, by the way. No, but what do you think? What is the fascination with Cuban culture, Cuban history, and in this case, obviously, Cuban architecture?
At a time when maybe the word marketing did not exist or was not on fashion, uh, it was responsible. Marketing was responsible for the success, apparent success of the so-called Cuban Revolution.
Mm.
Um, eh, it's a fact that the Cuban government invested a lot of money in advertising
Right.
in different ways that maybe some people do it now, but they did it,
Mm-hmm.
and they did it across the 5 continents.
Mm-hmm.
So spread the word, bring people that we will court, and then they will help us spread the word.
Well, some people call it marketing, others call it propaganda, right?
It is propaganda. That's the right word. Thank you.
Yeah.
And it changed along the years. I mean, the way it was crafted.
Mhm.
At some point, students were invited to be educated in Havana.
Mhm.
For example, there are many doctors, many Latin American doctors, many African and Caribbean doctors who were trained in Cuba.
Mhm.
And at some point, Cuba enjoyed a high prestige
Mhm.
in educating people.
But the reality, and I know you know this, you lived it. The reality is that it seems to be that there's two Cuban perceptions. Okay, there's the Cuba before the regime
Mhm.
or the government, and then there's the Cuba after the government. Um, and there's a lot of emotional a connection to that issue. I mean, some people who left Cuba in the early '60s have a specific perception of what they felt Cuba was. People who actually lived in Cuba after the '60s, who had a different experience, feel that there was a completely different Cuba than the ones that people left. So, um, eh, we can talk about propaganda or marketing, like you very well said, but at the same time, there seemed to be two Cubas in the late '50s, or
And
two narratives.
they were indeed.
Yeah.
One of the narratives, as you call it correctly, was about we offered free education, we
Mhm.
offer free public health, and it's high quality, and we are doing things in arts,
Mhm.
etc. That was one narrative, and let's call it the outward narrative.
Right.
Then the internal narrative
Mhm.
was so different.
You're
And
talking about the narrative after '59.
yes,
Okay.
after
Okay.
59.
Mhm.
And if you allow me to summarize it in one word, I would say decadence. It was a complete decay of everything. Everything fell gradually and progressively.
Mm. And well, I guess it goes back to your comment before. I mean, you could talk about a narrative, you could talk about marketing, you could talk about
Ideology.
right. But at the same time, the reality hits you, even if you want to pretend it's not happening or not. And in a way, the way I would say that the physical, I guess, representation of that decadence that you mentioned is the built environment.
Correct.
So the book itself, which is focused on the Cuban built environment and specifically about courtyards in Cuba. Before we get into more detail about the importance of courtyards and so forth, how do you think the physical the physical environment in construction in Cuba showcases that decadence?
Um, I would start saying that there was a boom in both design and construction since the late 40s,
Mm-hmm.
derived from the peak price of sugar in the international market. benefited Cuba immensely. And so it meant that in 1959, especially Havana,
Mhm.
was a gorgeous city with all services that you can imagine being provided, with more cinemas than Paris, unbelievable, more cinemas than New York, a very high standard of living.
The dollar value in 1951 was the same as 1 peso.
Yes, and
So,
there was a moment when it increased to 1 peso and 1 cent.
wow.
Yes, so everything was at a certain peak and it's still being developed, still in progress. And this is one of the things that is part of the questions and the narrative of those of that group that you mentioned,
Right.
the group that left either at the beginning of the 60s or later because the waves were different. I mean,
That
the
that is
waves,
that and you should talk about that because I think that
yes,
every wave was different. Every generation has been different, and their perspectives are different.
you're completely right. But before
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I go on, I want to refer to something related to your statement
Yeah.
about buildings and the built environment
Correct.
and all that. In the book, I quote Nobel Prize winner Octavio Paz, the Mexican writer, um, uh, who said that architecture is the unbearable witness of history.
That is
And
so true.
that's a powerful statement. Uh, the built environment tells you a story like the book does. And the visual archive, like Ricardo called it, that is in the book of the courtyards, is in the cities of Cuba and the towns of Cuba. So that's the best evidence of the decadence, of the decay after the abandonment and lack of maintenance, etc. But if we talk about the waves,
Mhm.
in the mid 60s, after the group that left initially, who had the resources,
Mm-hmm.
and basically came to Miami, etc. The next big group, or the first big group, was uh, the first exodus, and they left through a port named Camarioca. So
Mm-hmm.
many Cubans who are my age or older remember this name, Camarioca. That marked historically the first exodus.
Mm-hmm.
This became a pattern because the next one, bigger or larger, was in 1980 with
Yeah,
Mariel,
Mariel. Yeah.
who more people remember. According to stats, it said that 110,000 Cubans left. And then the next one was in 1994.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that the most recent was in the past 5, 6 years, to a point that the Cuban population decreased into millions recently. I mean, this is outrageous. Then the impact on the built environment is part of the suffering of Cuban people here and there.
Correct.
It brings sadness and even desperation to see a gorgeous building that falls down, a building where people lived until recently and had to abandon because it's not in good shape anymore. So there's a lot of issues that are related to the built environment.
So, is that in a way why it was so important for you to document it? Or is that something that just happened because you began this process over 35 years ago? And
Yeah,
then now
but there was
looking
a
back,
still decadence, Ricardo. Then,
yeah, yeah, of course.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm glad that you asked because the book started as an article and it was never published. And I understood that.
And when you wrote it, you were still living full time in Cuba.
Oh yes, that was around 1987, and at that time I had not traveled abroad ever. So my experience was very local, very Cuban. I had traveled throughout Cuba, and I had that opportunity. I have to clarify that not all of Cubans have been able to travel within
Within
Cuba.
Cuba.
Okay, this is something that is not often talked about. But I had the privilege because there were a couple of publishers who came to Havana, and then they asked me to write a book that was never published. I called it The Island Visions of Cuba. And there was a chapter that talked about cities, of course, the seven original so called villas that were founded between 1511 and 1515 by Diego
And you talk about
Velázquez.
those in the book in
Yes, it's
detail.
in the book. And then a whole gallery of beautiful towns that we find even today. So we paid a trip to the whole country. They took photographs. I took photographs too. And that book was never published for an unknown reason, even though there was a contract.
Right.
Anyway,
So this has been a labor of love for you.
it has been.
And you said it started with article.
Mhm.
And then, but how did it evolve into?
I-
Because by the way, I know you and I joke, but when you and I talked about the possibility, because I know you've been in the process, and just to be transparent, Julio César has published 2 books, Inside Cuba, and the other one is
Inside Havana.
Havana. And those are wonderful, by the way,
you.
books. But this is more in depth
It is.
and a lot more detailed. So when did it become basically an article? When did it transform from an article to a labor of love?
The minute I learned that it was not published, I reviewed the article. You know, because it's an article that you're asked for a publication, it has some length constraints.
Right.
So I decided to keep on working in this fascinating project along the years, and I decided to devote more time and extend the whole topic to international examples. To find out the relationship between ancient cultures and the presence of courtyards in these ancient cultures and the Cuban culture, and to find all the cultural relationships, and even the symbolic ones that we somehow relate in the book.
Well, but actually, and let's just jump into the detail of the book itself. But because I was making a terrible joke that it was supposed to be a couple hundred words, and it became an enormous labor of love that will. I mean, we'll say it here, but this is just the first out of other books that are going to come out based on all that work that you've done for over 35 years.
Hopefully,
And this one is focused on the Courtyards of Cuba. But then there's an intro that basically gives a little bit of background on the importance of courtyards all over the world. But I can tell you, folks, that there's a very well a written document that will become potentially another book about the importance of courtyards globally.
exactly.
And that will be a nice combination to this one. But
I
if we
think
go
so.
back and focus on courtyards in Cuba, which I have to say, let me continue by asking you this. Why did you choose, out of all the work that you've researched, to start focusing on courtyards itself?
Courtyards are very meaningful, and they have and provide this emotional connection, this spiritual connection. In courtyards, we played when we were children. We bathed on when it rained. We played with friends, and then we celebrated Christmas together as a family, and that was a tradition. And that tradition took place in courtyards, open to the sky, intimate, enclosed, but still open. This paradox, which is
So it's a combination.
it is.
And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but this is something you always tell me. the combination between the physical and the metaphysical.
Exactly.
You create a space that is a multi-use
It is.
in order for you to develop an experience and like we call a place of purpose for you, your family, and anything.
Mhm.
But at the same time, it has a functional a function. What is the functional side first?
Well, the functional side is this diversity of things that you can do in courtyards.
True.
And there are houses where there are several courtyards. So there's usually a more formal one for meetings and all that, and one more related to the back of the house and the service area of the house. This is also shown in the book. But specifically, not only that I grew up in a courtyard home, where later on my father planted a wonderful mango tree whose shadow we enjoyed when we played basketball with friends.
That emotional connection.
That's an
Wow,
emotional
that's awesome.
connection. Then my children played there, and their friends came to play with them. And later on, uh, I remember playing basketball with my son's friends in the same space, in the same courtyard, under the shade of the mango tree that my father planted.
Wow.
So this transcends not only my father's or my parents' life, but also ours. Uh, then courtyards in Cuban architecture became special, not only because of this convergence of traditions that is also explained in the book, where we find these also connections with Andalusia in the southernmost part of Spain, but where we recognize and acknowledge the presence of also classical traditions. When we teach students how to compose a building, we usually ask for something called a partie, which is a French word used in the Beaux-Arts times, but it brings together the idea of how you compose an architectural space. And the palazzo type is an Italian term to refer to the courtyard building. Is based on that hole open to the sky in the center of the plan of the building. So, from the composition point
you're
of view,
talking about
it's
a
important.
combination because
Exactly.
you also mentioned this. When the uniqueness about maybe the Courtyards of Cuba, if I understand correctly,
Yes.
it's not only the function that yes, you have cross ventilation, yes, you have the use of natural light. There's the experience part of it, but from a typology standpoint, you're connecting cultures because you're connecting. You just mentioned the classical Roman party
And the Islamic.
to the Islamic one in the south of Spain. So is that what makes you know courtyards in Cuba so unique? The combination.
In a very good part, it does.
Okay.
Um, because this fusion
Mhm.
makes them special. And then later on, the evolution of the type, because you correctly mentioned the word typology, courtyard buildings are a wonderful typology, and is found all over the world, as you also mentioned. So this became the more constant and the oldest composition element in buildings, in resonance with what existed from many centuries ago. So it proves that the tradition is alive.
Independent of the quote unquote style.
You're totally right.
Okay.
And then also some other word that is currently in fashion, sustainability. Well, let's talk about sustainability in courtyards.
Yeah.
In Cuba, there were water reservoirs, and the rainwater was collected
In the courtyard.
and reutilized. So usually in the center of the courtyard there was a well, and rainwater was collected and channeled there in the way the roofs drained. So there's a great wisdom in this tradition, and it's a tradition that has been there for centuries.
Well, let me.
And it's timeless, I believe.
I agree with you. So let's talk about the uniqueness of the Cuban courtyard. You talk about the small courtyard before you go in, what we call the saguan and things like that. So, what after the original typology was kind of created? How did it evolve to become a mostly a uniquely Cuban courtyard typology?
Without sounding chauvinist, I would like to say that Cuban courtyards are also important because they are beautiful.
Well, I don't. Why is that chauvinist? What are you talking about?
Well,
You're
I
too
mean,
formal. You're too much of a
maybe
gentleman.
yes,
But there
well,
we go.
they are beautiful, and the book
They are beautiful.
shows that.
I mean, the imagery on this book is outstanding. The pictures, you took 99% of them. You don't have to say much to actually understand that functionality that you mentioned becomes metaphysical once you understand the beauty and the soul that's within it that it's actually attached by the beauty of it. So
You're
I agree with
totally
you.
right. Courtyards are usually in the center of buildings, and we humans have a strong relationship with that notion of center,
Mhm.
which in Japanese architecture becomes the emptiness of the ring, yin and yang,
Mhm.
where the emptiness, apparent emptiness, becomes the more significant and symbolical. So when we talk about the beauty of Cuban courtyards, we talk about courtyards that have endured for over 5 centuries and that mm, stylistically covered from Renaissance style fortresses to modern architecture. And there is
Even military.
even military, yeah, military, religious, all that is seeing in the book. So it means that beauty was present even in mere functional buildings such as the fortresses.
Mm-hmm.
And when we look at buildings such as the Royal Force Castle or La Cabaña, we find beautiful spaces, very good proportions, uh, beauty in a word. And then we find a lot of beauty in the cloisters of convents. We find a lot of beauty in the Baroque houses in Cuba, and then the neoclassical palaces. And I'm talking about styles, but I'm also talking, and it's embedded the word evolution,
Mm-hmm.
not only stylistically, but also typologically.
Agreed.
Then we arrive at the end of the 19th century and the very first decades of the 20th century, and we find the transformation of the courtyard, which from a very humble beginning, call it vernacular, evolves to a very, very European, French style grand hall. I mean, a grand space, literally speaking, that we find in the palaces of Centro Gallego and Centro Asturiano.
And the Capitol building too.
And of course in the national capital, where there is the so-called grand hall of the lost steps, which is 100 meters, by the way.
It's a what?
It's 100 meters long.
Is it?
It is.
I didn't know that.
Oh yes, and then in the middle there is the rotunda, and the until recently tallest indoor statue in the world.
Wow. That's listen. I can listen for hours. For a couple of reasons. Number one, because of your passion,
Thank you.
but also the listeners may not know that even though I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, and the same thing with my wife Cristina, both our parents are from Cuba, so there's an emotional connection for us too. Also, the fact that Cuba is part of the Great Antilles, which connects Dominican Republic, I mean, La Española, which is Dominican Republic, Haiti, and of course, Puerto
Puerto
Rico.
Rico.
But when you talk about beauty, which is you said that it was actually funny when you said it, but the reality is that beauty could be measured.
I think so.
At least my opinion. I guess we both agree. And part of the reason I find in your analysis of courtyards, it's the scale
Right.
and it's the human scale. And another thing that I find amazing is that not only you analyze what would seem like traditional type vernacular or classical or Andaluz courtyards,
Baroque,
uh, b- um,
etc.
uh, uh, but what when you transfer that to modernism, which is, and I had a chance to go with you to some of these modern
Okay.
representations of architecture, it's still there and the scale is still there. So the traditional humanity that you lose with modern architecture mysteriously was kept in many of the modernist architecture designed by Cuban architects in Cuba. What does that basically tell us the importance and how deep the idea of courtyards were embedded in the culture?
Totally. In the book, it's been written that some modern architects in Cuba, started to look at the importance of cultural identity. And that was a quest that came from the 19th century, by the way.
Mm.
There was a quest for national identity.
Mm.
That was very strong. And it kept going on and on and on. And specifically in architecture, there was an architect, Eugenio Batista, was a professor also, who, with his own uh, work as an architect, his house and another award-winning house that is here, the Faya Bonet,
Mm-hmm.
in 1939, started to absorb in a very critical and creative way the traditions of Cuban architecture from past centuries. So he started to look at these very old cities of Cuba and the wonderful architecture, places like Trinidad in the center of Cuba,
Which is
and the
amazing.
use of wood, the use of courtyards mainly, but then also some other elements that I consider not as important as courtyards, which are also porches
Mm-hmm.
and persians, louvers.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, if you look at that, all of them are aimed at dealing with the climate. So it's climate responsive architecture at its best. Eugenio Batista inspired the best Cuban modern architects, such as Mario Romagnach and Nicolas Quintana, um, a lot of the, I would call the elite. There were also other very talented architects who were not part of this small group, but they were superb. And if you look at a
And they had the
building,
precedence.
they
This
had
is
the
where
presence,
this is where
right?
you have something that I believe as any architect or interior designer that's listening. When you live in an environment in which you can actually physically see the precedence, you will learn. Many of us talk about the possibility when you're studying, oh, let's go to Italy,
Mhm.
let's go to Latin America, XYZ, right? But when you have it in your own backyard, it allows you to actually absorb it and potentially, even if you want to mimic it, and potentially improve on it. And that's what's so incredible because you could see 500 years in your analysis of architecture, the importance of the courtyard itself in it, how it evolved, and how it never left. It never did.
And when if you allow me to add this to modern architecture, they achieved, I mean, these architects achieved a wonderful synthesis between tradition and avant-garde
Yeah,
by looking at precedents,
yeah.
by looking at the history. So this is an added merit of modern architecture in Cuba. Even before that term of modern regionalism
Mhm.
was coined.
Coined.
So Cuba pioneered in many, many things. In the book, it's also said how the first steam machine in 1794 was imported to Cuba. The railroad was in Cuba in 1837, before than Spain.
You mean the railroad?
The railroad,
Right.
yes. So Railroad. Look at this. An elongated island. What's the perfect solution for transportation? Railroad.
Right. And this is where I think that through your study and analysis, you not only learn about the courtyards of Cuba, and I think Cristina was mentioning this to you before, you learn about the history of Cuba. You learn about the history of Cuban architecture through a protagonist, which is the courtyard itself. Listen, Julio Cesar, we can stay for hours and we can talk about many of the different elements you've included in the book. I have to say that I'm very proud that we were able to collaborate.
I am too.
Andelani Press is a publisher that's focused on giving the writer total control and ownership of their intellectual property. And our intent is to showcase architecture and works of art that in some case might be forgotten, but done in a way that could be read by anyone. Not only architects, designers, and so forth, but the public in general. That's why I believe that what you've done with the pictures and being able to read while you look at the incredible imagery takes you through a journey that's actually very unique. And we're blessed to have that in our library. If you wanna buy the book, you can get it through andelani.com. And also you can buy it through Amazon. And if you are in Miami, you could go to Books and Books, and they're gonna be available while they last. Because to be fair, I was surprised. A lot of the books were actually snatched a couple days ago, and it goes back to where I started. What is that emotional connection? And I think that you talked about some of the history and the unique complexity of the history of Cuba, and the emotional challenges that come with it. But at the end of the day, there's so much curiosity because in some ways, especially if you're from the U.S., there's so much. It seems like a forbidden fruit. Like from an outside, you can't really touch it, you can't see it unless you see it through maybe a small window. And that's what this books becomes in a way. It's you can see a glimpse of Cuba's history through from the outside in, but written by someone that actually does it from the inside out. So with that, I thank you so much again,
I
and
thank you.
thank you for the gift. Well, anyway, thank you all for listening. It will be back soon, and hopefully by then, Cristina will be able to be here with us. And thank you. Remember, everything we learn is from the inside out.